Hello, everybody. I'm Jane Hansen. This week in the arena, as we wrap up another season, we're going to discuss some of the topics and current events that are on everyone's minds and that you, our viewers, have been talking about. Joining us now, Monsignor Kieran Harrington, the Director of Communications for the Diocese of Brooklyn, and our regular contributors, Elizabeth Scalia, Managing Editor of the Catholic Portal at Patheos.com, and Grant Gallicho, the Associate Editor of Commonweal magazine. So the last shall be first. Grant, let's start with you. What do you think was the biggest subject that we talked about this season?
Well, I think probably the sexual abuse scandal. Over the past couple of weeks, there have been some big news stories come out. One, the Vatican released guidelines for the bishops of the world to create norms about how to handle these abuse claims. Two, the John Jay study came out, which tried to explain how the crisis happened. And then three, in the next couple of weeks, the bishops are going to meet, and they're going to have to figure out those things, and they're going to have to find out what happened in Philadelphia, and whether they can create national norms that might prevent another Philly from happening in the future.
We joke in a certain sense about the fact that we're going to be discussing this topic 10 years from now and 20 years from now, and that it's affecting the generation. But I'm curious about whether you think, and you guys all think, this report may finally have said we've dealt with it. We're working towards making sure this never happens again. We're trying to take care of the victims in the best way possible, and let's go forward with the knowledge that this is a crisis that may finally be abating, or whether we will never be there.
I think that what the release of the report timed so soon after the news out of Philly shows is precisely that to a large extent we have dealt with it. We have put new policies in place. But what Philadelphia is that we need to stay vigilant, that we need bishops to have a real change of heart. Many have, but we need all of them to have a real change of heart, to be vigilant, not to hide behind canon law procedures, but to be open.
And don't you think as the next generation of bishops comes in and as newer, younger priests are moving up in the hierarchy, that all of that will change as well?
I think it has changed. I think pretty much universally it's changed. I think that sometimes there are failures that can sometimes happen because people are not, as Grant said, as vigilant. But I don't think it's because of malice. And I think that is there is a real heightened awareness. And I think it's something, Jane, you asked the question. I think it really has disfigured the church. The sex abuse scandal has disfigured the church, the image of the church, for generations. And I think that we're going to be dealing with the effects of that. But that doesn't mean that it can also be purifying in the life of the church. And that's what my hope is that this suffering, through this suffering that we're all going through, most especially the victims, that there might also be redemption.
Elizabeth?
One of the things I found interesting about the report was that it really wasn't able to pinpoint causality. And I was sort of grateful for it because in the long run, after 10 years of this, it's almost like Catholicism causes sex abuse. The equation was made. And this kind of destroys that equation. You can't really say with any kind of definitive, you can't say, well, this caused it or that caused it. And I think that's an invitation to broaden the outlook now and take a look at other institutions that are not being looked at. Mm-hmm. And we're still not going to find out what the cause is because the cause is an evil, supernatural battle. But let's start looking at that beyond the church now, because there are a lot of people suffering who've been abused outside the church and who are being ignored.
Right, and obviously all of those people deserve to have comfort and deserve to have acknowledgement. Let's switch gears and talk about what you thought was one of the highlights of the season in our discussions.
I thought the two beatifications that Benedict did, and it's unusual for him to do beatifications, but first going to England to beatify John Henry Newman, was a triumph for Benedict, because if you remember what was going on in the press and in England, marches and people saying he should be arrested when he lands in England, and people saying, he's a sex criminal, and it was miserable. It was the worst. Okay, I've seen bad press, but this was some of the worst press I'd ever seen. And he went in there, and Benedict was Benedict, and he confounded the naysayers, and he confounded the protesters, and he had a historic prayer opportunity with the Archbishop of Canterbury, at the grave of St. Edward the Confessor, and this was huge. This was enormously affecting to the English people who had basically kind of turned their backs on the church and had been leaving in droves. they're still seeing the fruits of it. I have friends in England who are telling me the churches are slowly but surely refilling. The English and Welsh bishops this week said, let's go back to meatless Fridays, not because we're trying to bring us back to a pre-Vatican II condition, but because it's something that we can do together in obedience is going to, in the end, unify us more. Very healthy thing. Benedict did great things in England.
And also, the English don't do very well preparing meats. It's kind of a bonus.
It's a twofer. Yeah. It's a twofer. But you were also in Rome for the beatification ceremony for John Paul.
When you've had 10 years of this miserable news about the sex abuse scandals, and then you take a look at 1.5 million to 2 people gathering in Rome, and I mean, the pictures were astounding, and I talked to people who couldn't get anywhere near it. They were over the bridge, over the Tiber River, still trying to be part of it. Just a huge shot in the arm for young Catholicism and for faithful Catholics who really, I think, needed something good and joyful.
What about any concerns that this is too soon to...
He has his miracle.
And how can something be too soon
if
the qualifications for beatification have been met? Then how is it really too soon?
Well, too soon in the sense that the Church traditionally waits a longer period.
But the requirements have been made. I mean, the requirements of his personal his orthodoxy, his spirituality, and as Elizabeth said, the miracle have been discovered. So why wait?
Yeah, but there have been some people protesting or contending that this very subject we were talking about first, sex abuse, that so much of it happened while he was Pope, or certainly much of it came to light during his reign. And
but it's not. This is not exaltation of his papacy, the work that he did as Pope. It's speaking about his life as a Christian and a man.
This is precisely why the Church has been hesitant to canonize popes. It's very difficult to separate a pope's papacy from his personal holiness.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting down the road looking at Benedict, because I think he is as transparently holy as John Paul, and I don't think he's perceived that way.
I think it's important to note that one of the fundamental things we believe as Christians is that we are not our work. We transcend our work.
Do you think there are any saints that might not be, if they were to be canonized today, might not be saints?
Saint Jerome.
Well, no. That fundamentally cannot be the case, right? Because if a person is canonized, what that fundamentally is a statement. It's an articulation of faith. It's an infallible statement that person is with God in heaven. So one cannot be infallibly defined to be in heaven,
but Saint Jerome was
not
mean.
in heaven. Well, you don't have to be nice to be a saint.
Well, you do have to have lived.
That's the problem. That's the problem of the Church today. Yeah, that is true.
Made up.
Yeah,
you have to be authentic.
That is true.
Authentic. All right, so Monsignor, let's go to you. What do you think were the...
I think that the struggle for human rights, freedom and dignity in the Middle East is probably the story that is going to be most transformative already and in the future. I think that what we are seeing in the Middle East is basically Muslims and those in Islamic society who've really been oppressed, and their human dignity has been infringed. And what you see is really a struggle not simply for political rights, but really for human rights. And I think that it is going to be a moment that is transformative, I hope, for Muslims in the Middle East, but for our whole world.
But the other side of that is that the other big story that's going to develop over the next year or so is the persecution of Christians in the Middle East.
Absolutely. I mean, you see that happening already in Egypt, right? So Coptic Christians are being
the same people who were supporting each other in prayer just 3 months ago.
Because you know what the issue is that the structures were so repressive that now you have basically religious structures, mullahs, who are very anti-Catholic or anti-Christian or anti anything other than Muslim, which are coming to the fore. But that might be a temporary problem. Hopefully, in time, that will dissipate.
Well, you would think that they were perhaps more organized than a lot of the people who were involved in these rebellious movements that had no real organization or structure to them.
Take comfort in the fact that the children of revolutionaries almost always kill the revolutionaries. So,
wait a minute.
How is that going to translate?
So I guess though, we have seen this unbelievable movement, and I think we've kind of all exulted in people taking back their own personal ability, their own personal freedoms. But yet, with that kind of concern, so maybe that will all weave itself through. But persecution for religious purposes has been going on since religion began.
Well, I mean, there's the thing about persecution is that, you know, there needs to be, and this is a fundamental question for Christians and for all people of faith, is, are we at war with one another, or are we in dialogue with one another? That's the big question. And I think that when you are confident in your position, when you're grounded in the conviction of your truth, you can enter into dialogue and not be afraid of the other.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to take a break, and we've got a lot of other things we need to talk about, so we'll be back. We would like to have you weigh in on our discussion anytime by going to our website at netny.net and click on Enter the Arena. We welcome your questions and comments, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, as we wrap up our yearly episodes of In the Arena. And let's talk about the whole killing of Osama bin Laden. I think there was a lot of people, Christians, Catholics, who said, is this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth kind of justice valid? And yet at the same time, we were thrilled to have him no longer be a threat to us. Grant?
There's no denying that as a New Yorker, I felt some satisfaction knowing that we had found and killed him. That my satisfaction, however, is not the satisfaction of justice, really. I know that the president said that justice was done. Maybe legally justice was done, but what about morally? Would it have been better if we had captured him and tried him, as we did Eichmann after World War II? Would that be a more consistent expression of American justice and sending in a very impressive team who no doubt, you know, were facing a great deal of fear, and I'm not surprised that mission ended up with his death. But
well, it seems though it was earmarked for his death from the very beginning.
I don't believe that to be true, because
Really?
the policy of the United States is not to, the policy of the United States government is not to engage in assassination. I would expect that their position was to apprehend him, right. But if the apprehension was not possible, they had to take every measure to protect their own lives, and if that resulted in his death, well, so be it.
So what about all of the I guess people are calling it the treasure trove of information that came out of there, including all of the reports of him with the porn? I mean, that was...
Yeah, I guess that's one way to hide your secrets. I don't really understand.
But I mean, we did have an awful lot of information that came out that from there. You know, then the debate about whether or not release the pictures of him in his death.
I'm actually delighted that they didn't release the pictures. I think that the way the president executed on this was flawless. First off, again, he has to be commended for the fact that he did not drop a bomb on the compound, but that he actually had the guts to send in the SEALs to try to extract Osama bin Laden.
Would any other president have made, I'm so tired of this gutsy call thing, would any of the other president have made a different call?
I absolutely think they would have, especially in light of what happened with the Iranian hostages.
And
we were in a hostile territory, and when you hear what happened with the message and with the mission, especially with the helos and how that was and how they were damaged, it absolutely could have had a very different outcome. And he took the risk. So listen, I think that you got to give the man the kudos for making that kind of a decision. Now, that being said, I think at the same time, we don't want to create a spectacle out of what Osama bin Laden has done. And I think that it's very appropriate to say he was buried at sea, and that's it. Have a nice day.
Yeah, that was fine, but I don't think it was flawless in the way, I mean, the operation itself may have been flawless, but the White House just made one gaffe after another in terms of
Elizabeth,
changing the story.
When you're keeping something secret, and you have to keep
But they
very
weren't
few
keeping it secret. The president was the first one to get out there and say, oh yeah, we had a firefight. Oh no, it wasn't a firefight. I mean, that was a big problem. It actually changed what should have been nothing but a win for him into something very negligible, where he had people wondering what the heck is going on.
Yeah. But I do think the question of how we're now being perceived in the rest of the world after this raises some questions for me. Does it for you in terms of...
You know, my son was in Washington when this went down, and some of his classmates grabbed their American flags and ran over to the White House to participate in that. And he didn't want any part of it because he felt he was a little troubled by the triumphalism of it. You know, and he was old enough to remember that on 9/11, when our towers went down, there were people in the West Bank dancing in the streets, and it disturbed him a lot to see his generation doing pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, I can understand that. I do remember reflecting after I heard the news that my daughter, who is now 20, was 10 years old when, and so her entire teenage years have been consumed with this threat of terrorism, which is terribly unlike what we were when we were little kids.
Well, that's not true. I mean, we were menaced by the Soviet threat, the
Well,
Red
that's
threat.
true.
We were
So
hiding
there
under the
was. I mean,
desk.
remember there was. I remember having
we hadn't
bomb
had an
drills.
attack. I know,
Right,
but
but
we
there
hadn't
hadn't
had
been
an
an
attack
attack
on
on
our
our
own
soil.
soil.
Yeah.
And particularly in your known neighborhood,
Yeah, right,
and
right,
3,000 people dying from an attack in your own city. So I think they've lived under this threat. And I asked her about it. I wasn't sure if there was relief that he was dead or if she was really frightened about what's going to happen next. And I think that's something that we all wondered too, about what may the revenge be.
Well, I think that's the question. I mean, it seems that all the reports seem to indicate that he had been pretty much isolated within the Al-Qaeda operation by that point already. However, his capture, his death, is a tremendous victory because it shows that there is no place you can hide from American justice. And again, I just think that what the president did in pursuing him and having the guts to go into Pakistan and to accomplish this mission, he really needs to be commended for.
And knowing that would risk our relationship with the Pakistani government and the military, I mean, that raises a whole new set of questions, which he must have known was going to be part of the result.
Sure.
I think it's interesting also, Jane, that, you know what, he's really alienated his own base. Politically, it also has some implications for him. I mean, there are a lot of liberals who are really upset that information was, extracted from people through heightened measures and Gitmo and other places. The liberal base is not particularly happy by it, and I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a challenge to Barack Obama from the left.
And of course, there's going to definitely be a challenge from the Republicans. So, anybody want to make a guess on who's going to be the Republican candidate for president this coming fall?
They are every single one of them is past their sell-by date. I just want to see them all off the stage, bring in some fresh faces.
Governor Schwarzenegger.
No Huckabee, no new.
He wasn't born in the United States. I
Oh,
don't think
that's right.
He doesn't have a birth certificate to
hasn't been
prove
fixed
that
yet?
point.
Yeah, get rid of
that caused him trouble, though.
I don't know.
What about Mitch Daniels? Do you think he's got a chance?
He's playing coy right now. I think Tim Pawlenty is probably the most capable, but also the most milquetoast.
Milquetoast, he's a laugh a minute.
Come on, it's like one white bread middle manager after another. There's no flavor at all. It's sad.
We need
Well, I mean,
a woman.
there's
we need
always
a good, strong, viable
tried
female
last
candidate.
time.
I mean, you do
Well,
have
the women-
Mitt Romney. It's important to note Mitt Romney raised $10 million in one single day. That's a big take. That
Yes,
makes
it
him
is.
formidable. You also have a guy like Bobby Jindal out there.
What?
I mean, certainly.
Bobby Jindal, I don't think will ever
Let's
be
talk
top
about,
of the
though,
ticket.
you just mentioned Mitt Romney. Let's talk about the idea of a Mormon being president. Do you have any issues with that?
Huntsman is considered a very formidable character. I think that and a formidable contender. I don't have a problem with a Mormon. How as a Catholic, when John F. Kennedy ran and Al Smith before him, how can I take issue with someone else's religion?
I just wanted to ask the questions. Okay, I want to talk about one of my favorite shows, which was when we talked about technology, applications for confession, for some of the prayers.
The office.
So, where is technology going to take us next within the realms of the Catholic Church, and what can we phone in religion in a certain respect?
I think the big challenge for us with technology, right, is to ensure that people can do things virtually, but at the same time be part of a physical community. And that's really the tension that we're always kind of trying to arbitrate.
Well, 2 weeks ago when I was in Rome, part of that was to attend a particular meetup between the Vatican and bloggers, which was really interesting. The Pontifical Council of Social Communication said, and also the Council of Culture said, this is an alternative media that we really need to make use of. They can help us or they can hurt us.
Well, I mean, to the point, that's what you do, is you are a blogger at the Catholic portal for Patheos. And I'm just curious about what you see more and more traffic. There's more and more people that are using that as a means of expressing themselves, as learning, education.
It's becoming an enormous tool for evangelization. I can't tell you. And it's the most gratifying thing in the world. Every time I think I'm done with this, I'm so tired of it, I'll get an email from somebody saying, I'm back at church after 15 years, and it's not just me, it's the Holy Spirit. It's a million different things going on that they're seeing online, but it's exciting people enough, and it's informing them and catechizing them in ways they never have been catechized before. And so when you have that, and you also have the energy that can counter, say, a mistaken narrative, like when the Pope talked about condoms and the mainstream press went into, oh, condoms are okay, the Catholic bloggers came out and said, no, this is what he said, and they actually managed to turn that back. And I think a lot of people said, that's really interesting. I'm going to look into this, and I appreciate current knowledge.
What do you think about that, Mr. iPad user, about the evangelization of the church
I've
through?
only ordered the iPad. I may get it by Christmas.
I promised it to you by Christmas.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm dubious about whether technology can evangelize. I mean, I think it's good to, it's a very sound way to distribute information. But as Monsignor Harrington mentioned, I mean, if technology is not fostering in-person relationships, then I don't really think it's going to do us a lot of good.
But what if it's a tool for helping us really think and really say, I hadn't looked at it from this perspective, and maybe this is a means for me to actually get back to some kind of a faith base that may be missing in my life.
I don't see it as a panacea. I mean, I think it's great that we can go online and read more opinions.
Well, I don't think anybody was suggesting that it's a panacea.
It's just a tool.
Oh, there are a lot of bloggers who do.
All right.
But not you.
We're going to continue this discussion in just a moment. We'll take a little break, but we'll be right back with some final thoughts. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. Continuing our conversation, we were just talking about technology. I'm just wondering if you guys have any ideas for another new app that might be coming up, predictions.
I think we need an app for this show. The In the Arena app. And you click it and it's just Elizabeth and Grant barking at each other.
But I mean, really, it seems with this continuing developing, that nobody ever would have guessed the popularity of the confession app. So I would think that there might be even more to come. No?
I think that there's space for catechetical apps. Certainly, I think that for today, a lot of young people who are thinking about becoming a Catholic, it's hard to kind of link up with an RCIA program and the schedule of an RCIA. The question for the church is always going to be is how do we use technology to make things easier for people to learn about the faith, to enter into a dialogue with the faith, and at the same time not replace human interactions.
I think one thing that would be cool is if parishes, this would be a really expensive proposition, but if parishes had an app for the church structure, so you could go in with your phone and maybe look at the apps and have it explain what the apps is. Look at the kind of column, look at the artwork, look at the stained glass, and have the app explain to you what the symbols mean, who the artist was, etc. I think that would be pretty neat.
Right. I think that would be cool. Well, now, as we're wrapping up here, I'm just curious about what your predictions are for what will be the biggest issue among Catholics in the months and the year to come. Monsignor?
I think the biggest issue that Catholics will be struggling with in the course of this year is again the impact that the economy is having on Catholics throughout the country, throughout the world, and the pressures that places upon the church in terms of realignments and schools and Catholic institutions. So if I were to guess, I would say the impact of the economy on Catholic families and how the church is responding to help them, and at the same time is kind of coping with the impact of the economy on the institutions itself.
Mm-hmm. Durant?
I would agree with that. I think locally you'll see that New York has just begun a round of parish closings. They're studying the problem, and that's going to move forward, and it's going to be interesting to see how many parishes get closed, because this is a time that the church seems to be shrinking. So I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Which is troubling, because one of the reasons that people love being involved in the church is because of the parish community and the services that are offered. And if your local parish is no longer there, now you have to go further and further away, Mass may not be so convenient, and other services might just be a little too hard. And so people will say, I don't know.
Yeah, but you have to take hope. I mean, New York is constantly reinventing itself, right? And there are successive waves of new generations. And what I think we can take hope in is the new wave of immigrants, especially Hispanics, who are really providing the leaven, the vibrancy for the church today. So I think there are a lot of real opportunities in the midst of some some downside.
Sure, in the midst of some difficulties.
I think
Elizabeth?
Catholics are going to have some challenges in terms of how they perceive social issues and weighing their Catholicism against their social interest.
Like?
Whether it's, I've been voting Democrat all my life, but I really can't reconcile myself to this pro-choice position, or I've been a union member all my life, but I think they're being kind of heavy-handed. I have to weigh this against what I think of as a Catholic, and also then maybe you're a Catholic Republican who has to struggle with what do we do about the poorest of the poor, but we must also make some cuts to this, very bloated economy. So I think there's going to be some real internal challenges for Catholic social conscience.
But
in the
don't you
coming
think
year.
that's always been the case?
I think it's going to be
Exaggerated?
exaggerated or intensified this year.
Because of where we are economically, or because of...
Just because we're in a bit of tumult. We're on a new playing field here. We've never been in such debt. We've never been so insecure. We haven't had a sustained 10% unemployment rate for a long time. And I think it's just going to shake up our sensibilities a bit.
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to leave the very last word to you. What message would you like to give to the people who are watching this program, in addition to thanking them for watching?
Well, it's really great to have the viewers that we have, and the important part of this program, I think, is to invite people to enter the arena, and that's the point. Is that people have to be a part of the civil discourse, and really that people of faith have to enter the arena. Sometimes you get eaten by the lions, but sometimes you can champion the lions as well, and that's really what my hope would be for our viewers.
And for them to have taken away a sense that there is honest discussion, which I think is perhaps the most important thing for all of us, that within the realm of the Catholic Church there is an ability to discuss these issues in a real and relevant way. And
from paganism to gay marriage to Osama bin Laden to the sexual abuse scandal, I think that we've tried to provide a forum for an honest and open exchange with people who don't necessarily agree with the position of the Church.
We were supposed to be honest.
Well, you work for Commonweal. We know that's not the case.
They are all kidding one another. But the truth is that it's important to hear from viewers and to know what subjects are really that they are struggling with, because we are all challenged in our own individual way from whatever it is, be it a social issue, be it an economic issue, be it something that really tugs at our heartstrings. It's just we are all challenged, and we all have important things with our religion we need to discuss, and we hope that this has been a forum for them to be able to do it. So thank you guys for all of your patience with me this season, and mine with you. Never mind. And thank all of you, the viewers, for being with us. And don't remember that you don't need a TV to watch the net. We are always online at netny.net. For all of us here, I'm Jane Hanson. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next year in the arena.